Thank you for taking the time to listen. My name is Mark Whitfeld, and I'm going to be talking to you about the case for NGXS. I lead the core team of NGXS, so I guess you could call me a bit biased, but there is a reason why I got involved in this project in the first place. To start off, I'd like to put something forward to you. The best code bases are clean, simple, predictable, and maintainable. Now, why am I giving this talk? For a bit of background, NGXS was released 2 years after NGRX in response to a need for a simpler state management that felt more like Angular. It was adopted very enthusiastically and very quickly by the community and has been constantly growing ever since. It currently has 1/4 to 1/3 of the number of users compared to NGRX, and it is used by many large companies on very large applications. So how is NGXS different? And why do so many prefer it over the alternatives? Let's take a look. So firstly, NGXS is state management for Angular. Everything feels like Angular. It leverages decorators, classes, dependency injection, all the things that you would expect to see in an Angular app. It follows a CQRS pattern, that's command query responsibility segregation, and provides a scaffolding for your application's intelligence to live in. But as you'll see, in NGXS, there are no creator functions, no reducers, or any unfamiliar functional constructs. It just looks and feels like Angular. Secondly, in NGXS, actions are classes. Actions are type safe because their classes represent what they are and what their shape is, i.e. their model. The constructor is essentially the action creator in other paradigms, but the TypeScript constructor shorthand syntax offers a very natural and easy way to declare the properties that are part of your payload, as you can see in this code sample in front of you. There's no need for a payload property or anything like that. You'll see that there's a static type on the action, but that's not part of the instance, it's part of the class. Actions in NGXS also have a life cycle. So action goes from being dispatched all the way through to being completed, and that's either successfully, with an error, or cancellation. And actions are also multicast, just like any other Redux paradigm. In NGXS, selectors are just simple functions. They have a clean dependency declaration syntax. They're pure functions, which means that they're easy to test. They are composable, and they are memorized. These selectors can be declared within a state or apart from a state, possibly as a function or as a static member on another class. In addition, NGXS has very clean component collaboration. If you have a look at this code sample from a component, you'll see that there's minimal code behind. NGXS uses decorators, just like your input decorator on a component. You have your select decorator with NGXS. And to dispatch things, you would dispatch using the store. There's also minimal RxJS complexity. So just use the async pipe to get it into your template, and your component is fully reactive. NGXS supports on push. So one of the great things about NGXS is that your primary mental model are feature states. Each state is a standalone domain concept. Now, this matches how the brain likes to relate to things as opposed to abstractions or decompositions. So you can think about your state as a container for handling side effects and updates to a certain state model within the application. If we have a look at this code sample, you'll notice that there are no reducers. There are no separate side effects. It's all cleanly catered for in your action handlers. In addition, your states can be loaded eagerly or lazily. There's no real difference, no special ceremony around them. It's just the typical way that you'd load something within a module in Angular. Our selectors are simple, pure functions. We've looked at them before, but their inputs are data that they depend on. They don't refer to some global state model. When you test them or run them, you're not passing through some application state. You're passing through just the pieces of data that they need. So they're therefore very testable and very, very straightforward to use. The other thing is that there's no magic string proliferation in an NGXS application. So as we've seen before, our actions, they have a static type property. Now that's used as a descriptor of our action, but that string isn't found anywhere else. When we refer to an action, as you can see with in this code sample, with the action hook there for the handler method, it refers to the action by its class. When you initialize a state, you refer to the state by its class. Yes, the state does have a unique name, but states are referred to by their class. That name is just used in order to make sure that it has its own unique place to sit in the global state. Selectors as well, they declare their inputs that they require, and they don't need to traverse some sort of app state with magic strings or paths. And in our application, there's no need to store string constants or enums everywhere just to make sure that we can access the right things and use the right strings in the right places. And by implication, NGXS is very good at tree shaking because we are referring to the actual objects, the actual classes, the actual things. So if we're not using it anymore, it will just get tree shaken out of our application. Another thing that's really special about NGXS is that asynchronicity is a first-class citizen. So I've mentioned an action has a life cycle. Now that life cycle is async aware, I like to call it. So typically with a Redux application, you would have your action trinity. So for example, load customer success, load customer failure, those sort of things. With NGXS, you don't really need to do that because the coordination of an asynchronous piece of work and related updates can all be kept together in one place, as you can see in this code sample. Also, the completion of an action can be tied to the completion of the asynchronous work that it triggered. As you can see, this handler is returning a promise. You'll see how that's used later. You'll also see that here we've chosen to use async await. We don't have to, but we're choosing to use async await here, and we have no fear of impacting zones. Action handler code is executed outside of the Angular zone by default to avoid unnecessary change detection. Our actions are cancelable, as you can see with this property here, the cancel uncompleted flag. This replaces the need for your switch Mac RxJS operators. And you don't actually find that your developers need to get on board with learning all of those more advanced concepts in RxJS. The other thing is that the dispatch function on the store returns an observable. So the caller is given insight into the completion of the work that's related to the action that they triggered. So as you can see in this code example, actions can be sequenced without any particular ceremony. We just dispatch the first action, wait for the completion, and then dispatch the next action. This is very handy for very straightforward, clean ways of coordinating things within your application. One of the other things that I really love about NGXS is that we have a very active and helpful community. This community mainly resides in the Slack channel. We have a few thousand members there. If you ask a question, you're guaranteed to get an answer pretty quickly. Also, obviously, within our GitHub, logging issues and those sort of things. But with NGXS, you have a vast array of plugins to choose from, different integrations that you can use within your application to integrate with forms, to log things to the console, to integrate with Firebase or the router or storage or different things like that. All of these have been contributed by the community. There's even a place called NGXS Labs where more experimental plugins are worked on. And now something that we really do take pride in with NGXS is our pragmatic approach and the dev ergonomics around NGXS. So you will have noticed that in some of the NGXS code, it looks like the strictness of the Redux approach has been loosened a bit. Now, this has been done in favor of practicality. Now, your team can decide to still follow the strict Redux approach in order to ensure that you have a perfect experience in the Redux dev tools. But we found that in practice, often that's not all too necessary, and the trade-offs are often not worth it. Another thing about NGXS and this dev ergonomics is that it's really easy to onboard new developers. Junior and apprentice level developers do not struggle to understand the paradigm and get on board with it. In one of my experiences, I saw apprentice developers coming straight out of university, and within 2 weeks, new to Angular, new to NGXS, they were able to contribute to the project in a meaningful way. This to me was testament to the simplicity and the ergonomics that are available within NGXS. In NGXS, you get reactivity, but with a lot less RxJS. I wrote a reasonably sized example project, and I found, as I was wanting to play around with the code a bit, that I'd never added RxJS operators. I'd created the entire application without having to switch map, concat, or any of those things. It was all pretty much straightforward reactive code without much RxJS. So in NGXS, you'll also find that there's less code. NGXS puts magic where it matters. It handles all the plumbing for you, just like Angular. That's part of the reason why we chose Angular. It does all these amazing things for us without us needing to think about it. And in NGXS, there's really minimal ceremony around creating a new state. And you'll find that in your application, because the cost is really low to creating a new state, there's not much debate about it. You can create a state and you end up having an application with many microstates that become really, really useful and really composable as the application grows. So finally, let's look at the business side of all of this. So the code that you write has a future cost. You might be thinking, currently, what is my technical solution right now? But we should be considering what is the future cost of this code. There's a cost in terms of maintenance, complexity, knowledge transfer, skill level required, and those sort of things. Now, NGXS leads to having a higher quality code base because it leverages familiar patterns, a decoupled architectural approach, and an easier to understand paradigm. So developers are clearer on where things go within the application, and they can contribute meaningfully very quickly. One of the things is that we found that using NGXS makes hiring a lot easier because NGXS does not force you to raise the bar in terms of the skills requirement in order to work on your application. Everything is simple, straightforward, easy to understand. Now, you might say, Mark, you've convinced me, but I have an existing application. Well, if you want to convert an existing application, this is something that many, many people have done. The conversion typically happens 1 to 4 days, depending on the size of your project. Obviously, depending on the practices within your project, but concepts map very easily between any Redux approach and NGXS, and you can incrementally improve your code base to reduce the Redux ceremony over time. You'll find that the number of lines of code in your application will drop quite dramatically in doing the conversion, and we haven't heard of one case where someone has converted and felt like they've wanted to convert back. So that, for me, is a testament to the usefulness and the the great solution that we have in NGXS. So I'll finish off with this. The best code bases are clean, simple, predictable, and maintainable. I believe that NGXS can lead you there. Now it's up to you. What is your decision? Thank you very much for having me. If you want to get a hold of me, you can reach out to me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Mark Whitfeld, not Whitfield, Whitfeld. And if you want to follow for updates on NGXS, the NGXS store Twitter handle is what you should follow. Thank you very much for having me. I hope you enjoy a great conference.